I'm watching this Planet Peterson video, and his guest uh, believes that aliens or some kind of supernatural entities are responsible for um, ancient civilizations having archetypical stories, right? That the stories and the technology and the culture, like the general cultural awareness, was incited by aliens. And see, I don't understand really. It's curious to me because this gentleman that is on the show, he said that he completely disagrees with religion as a concept, that it's used to indoctrinate people. And I find that to be fascinating to hear from somebody who has deluded themselves. Like, he's just got his own bullshit that's not based in reality. He thinks it's based in reality due to delusions of grandeur. That's what it really is. Is he believes in the conspiratorial mindset that he's somehow figured out or on the pulse of something that modern people, modern culture, modern science, modern knowledge has somehow evaded. It's rooted in what is frankly kind of a racist way of looking at ancient civilizations. It's looking at ancient civilizations like they're like that primitive people, primitive in quotation marks, couldn't have done any of the sort of things that we do, and they couldn't have figured out any of the sort of things that we figure out about like life and the universe without some kind of outside intervention, some kind of kickstart. It's bizarre to me how a person divorced from religious creation myths has simply co-opted ancient religious creation myths, because that's what it is. It's like the Mayans or whatever believed in a certain thing that explained who they were and what they were and why they were there in South America and why the entire universe existed, and so on and so forth. It's like, what's the difference? What's really the functional difference? The functional difference is that you're like making even crazier, wackier shit up. It's to do with some level of superiority or just lacking critical thinking skills. I don't know why. Like, he kept saying this thing about consciousness was incited by these aliens. What is so fucking unfathomable about the idea that human beings just developed consciousness? I it's the it's this whole it's again and again it's this aversion to natural explanations for things. People want it to be supernatural or wacky or crazy. They this line, like from a very young age, I learned that it was important to distinguish fiction from reality. The example I have is Grand Theft Auto, right? In Grand Theft, people want it to be supernatural or wacky or crazy, stealing cars, and the consequences for you really aren't that crazy. Nor are the consequences for the quote unquote people that you affect, because they're not real people. At a young age, I played Saints Row, which is kind of like Grand Theft Auto, and I learned that difference. The difference between fiction and reality. Reality is composed of information you get from nature, and fiction is information that is made up. And it's bizarre to see adults struggling to make this distinction. That's literally what this person is doing, is drawing from mythology to describe nature. And you can do that as a why, but it's really weird to me when you start doing it as a how, because it betrays this infantile way of looking at facts. Like, this is a bit of a tangent, but that's what these discussions are for, just for my brain to kind of get running and say some things. That is what strikes me as so odd about Christianity and really any religion that poses the idea of good versus evil, because that is such a fictitious concept. It's so ingrained in fiction that modern fiction tends to subvert that expectation of good and evil and black and white, because modern fiction wants to be realistic on a level. It wants to really speak to the way things are. And so it avoids black and white situations, good and evil situations, because it acknowledges that the real world isn't like Lord of the Rings. There is no shadowy keep with an evil eye perched upon it. There is no orc army. There are no angels of pure virtue and demons of fallen status. That's a thing that exists in the realm of fiction. There is no absolute good. There is no absolute evil. But people get wrapped up in these fictions we create about our reality. They're convenient and useful fictions, don't get me wrong. Like the idea, as an idea, that there are evil things and evil people perpetrate evil actions is incredibly functional and useful. But only insofar as you realize that that's not actually the truth. Because what the actual truth is that there are intentions driven by motivations, and there are actions. That is all that actually exists in morality. People are motivated by their feelings to do something, and they can intend to do something good, quote unquote good. They can intend to do something quote unquote bad. And then they have the actions that betray their intention, which was guided by their motivation. That's all that actually exists. So, as an example, I think Vladimir Putin is a piece of shit. I think he's a psychotic, evil piece of shit. And I think the world would be better if he didn't exist. But I also acknowledge that once upon a time, Vladimir Putin was a human baby, right? He was a child, and he had dreams, and he had an environment that shaped who he is as an adult. His experiences have shaped what motivates him as a person. He has good intentions for Russia. But as an outsider, I can clearly see that the actions he takes to fulfill those intentions are deplorable and psychotic and, imperialist. That's not inconsistent with the idea that there isn't good or evil. I think when you take it too far, right, when you actually believe in the fiction, it's like, another example is money. Money is a fiction. We made that shit up. So whenever you take the fiction too far and begin to, commodify human beings as monetary assets, you've taken the fiction too far. You've allowed the fiction to step past the boundary of reality. It's the same with good and evil. Because I can say anything is evil. It doesn't matter. It's arbitrary, really. It's not totally arbitrary in practical application, but if we draw the fiction as truth, then it's arbitrary. Because the orcs thought they were doing the right thing. Saruman thought he was doing the right thing. Sauron thought he was doing the right thing. Fucking they at least in those examples. But yeah, that's the problem. Is that it's arbitrary from the outside. If we assume good and evil are real things that actually exist, the definitions are up to individuals. But the reality is not. It's so. I think I got it. The fiction of it can be manipulated in any way to suit real interests. Christians tend to say that, like, for example, stealing is wrong. But someone of the opposite persuasion could say that property is wrong and evil. And it's that simple. Who is any one person to say? Who is any one person to write the fiction of what is right or wrong? We need to acknowledge that the line is there. And I don't think that that's the way most people operate in their day-to-day lives. They believe the fiction of money. They believe the fiction of good and evil. They believe the fiction of objects. Like, objects don't exist. That's something we make up. There's no such thing as a tree. It's just a collection of parts. It's just another way that everything expresses itself. If you can't define a tree without relating it to every other single thing that exists. Because there's really only one thing. And as organisms, we invent this convenient fiction that there are many things. Because that's more practical from our perspective. Going back to the alien guy. He doesn't seem to understand the difference between fiction and reality, which is what I've been trying to communicate, is what the difference is and where it lies. Because human beings are just fabrication machines. It's all we do. It's very helpful and useful, but it doesn't actually describe reality. So that's... People think they can just invent their own reality. And in a way we do. But there are certain things that we can look at and see are beyond our fiction. At least if you assume that things actually exist like I do. And I say that in a tongue-in-cheek way, but how else am I supposed to say it? I assume things exist. That could be considered fictitious, but it's so practical that it might as well be real. But there's nothing practical about believing that aliens spurred upon consciousness. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so extreme and beyond what can be derived just by simply assuming that the world is real. Because this guy was saying that the ancient Sumerians were the first humans to be the first culture to be conscious. And that's so meaningless. Because human beings were conscious far before. Like, why do you think a human being ever got up and decided that they wanted to stay somewhere and live somewhere and farm crops and have a family and store food? It's because they were aware of, to some degree, of what was going on. They knew that they existed, or at least that they believed that they existed. They had reason to believe that they existed. And they knew that the environment, shit, I didn't mean to do that, had traits and such, and that they could manipulate those traits into novel forms. If they weren't conscious, they wouldn't have done any of that. They'd be like a bobbit worm. The only thing a bobbit worm is conscious of is, like, what's directly in front of it to eat. Consciousness in that way is just like, it's a complexity of the way we simulate the world. I'm going on another tangent, but this is a tangent I'd like to go on. Awareness is a tool. It's a tool we evolved. We can tell we evolved it because other organisms have shreds of it. So like a bobbit worm, for example. It can't play Minecraft. It literally has no idea what the fuck any of this even could be. If it saw it with its fucking 2 million color vision, which I assume it has, its brain would not even begin to be able to parse what is going on. But a bobbit worm still lives just fine, because consciousness is a mechanism by which we navigate our environment. What is cool about human beings is that we have evolved a generalist model of consciousness, in that the scenarios we can simulate to our benefit have reached a sort of critical mass where they're beyond simple things. They're beyond what could be seen as mechanistic. It's like a bobbit worm has a sort of mechanistic consciousness. Its smell receptors go off, or its antennae twitch, or sense movement in the water, and that's when it goes, yeah, and it comes out of its burrow to assault whatever hapless creature has found itself in its target, in its zone, whatever. In the same way, a chimp has its own version of consciousness that appreciates its own environment's stimuli. It responds to its environment, its typical environment. And what I'm really getting at is that's what consciousness is. It's just awareness that is useful. And like I said, human beings are unique in that they've reached a critical mass of awareness. And that's what we call consciousness, like human consciousness, the experience of being, is just the ball rolled so much and things in our brain became so connected that we began to be able to simulate arbitrary things. Because a chimpanzee can't simulate anything arbitrary in its brain. It's always got to have some practical application, at least as far as we know. They could look up at the stars and be like, yo, that's sick, or whatever, you know. But when a human being looks at the stars, they can think all sorts of arbitrary things about it that don't have to make sense. We have the amazing capacity to not make any sense at all. We have imagination, which is something that, as I understand, no other animal has. And that is just an extension of our consciousness. Awareness is just a reaction. Like, if there were nothing to be aware of, we couldn't be aware. Because it's a reaction to stimuli. And I really mean that. Like, even if my brain were in a jar, and I was, like, alive, quote unquote, if there was nothing being fed into it to sort of, I want to say promulgate, but I don't think that's the right word. That's the to initiate our awareness, our consciousness. We wouldn't be conscious of anything. How could we be? How could we be conscious of nothing? That's like the state you were in before you were born. Do you have any memories from then? Are you aware of then? Of course not. Because if there's no input, there can't be an output. And that's what consciousness is. It's a way of managing output. It's a way of like internalize, like it's really just part of decision making. What outcome do I want? Like, I want to go back into my house here, my estate house. And in my brain, subconsciously, it allows, like, I have all these stimulus from my past. So, like, I know that whenever I press the W key, I move forward. And I know that, based on the visual information I'm receiving, like my relative location, and my brain makes a map, like an internal map of where I'm going, where I want to go, and what is in between me and those things. And that's why I can do this, because I modeled in my brain where to go and what to do and what actions I needed to take, such as moving my mouse or pressing the W key, or if I want to go faster, pressing it twice. That is what consciousness is. It's just that unfolding and happening a million billion times in your brain over and over and over and over and over again forever until you die. I really did get on a tangent with this, but maybe I'll call this series Bibo Thoughts, and we'll just let her rip with nonsense tangents like this. So yeah, bye-bye. Okay, I'm still watching that video, and the guy's still talking. He keeps saying this thing that, like, the Mayans and the Aztecs and the ancient people were lying about their mythologies. And he's saying that it's so absurd that all these people would just lie that they were contacted by otherworldly entities. They're not fucking lying. You know, when you believe something to be true, and you don't have evidence that contradicts it, and you tell somebody that thing, you're not lying. Once you become aware of contrary evidence, and it's robust enough to prove you wrong, then you're lying. But lying is knowingly telling something that isn't the truth. Telling something that isn't the truth is not inherently lying. It's just crazy. It's the guy's obviously just stupid or stoned or something. And, you know, it honestly makes me feel like an idiot for being a stoner, because the people that are stoners are just so fucking dumb. It's remarkable. Because I never thought anything like that. I thought this shit that I talk about, this, like, I call it my wacky nonsense. Shit about consciousness and you know, I don't know, things that pertain to, like, reality. I don't know what the fuck these people are doing, dude. I don't get it. But that's that.